All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to October's webinar, October 2023, How to Feel Better. I'm Faith Hoskins. I'm a change and neuroplasticity coach, and I help my clients rewire their brain so that they can navigate change faster, easier, and with less pain. So I have a little bit of confession to make today that how to feel better is a little bit misleading, but not completely. So there's two ways that I want to think about this. How to feel better, meaning how to get better at feeling, period. And then in that, it's going to help you feel better, which I think most people mean when they say that is feeling more comfortable or pleasant emotions, feeling more positive emotions. But I think the key first to doing that is actually getting better at feeling. So it's a little bit of a pun. I thought it was creative, but there you go. That's what I came up with. All right. So we kind of have, when we're talking about emotions, I really want to start by just talking about these different sensations that we have in our body. I know a lot of us say positive or negative emotions. And, I know some of you have worked with me before. I try to avoid that, even labeling emotions as negative or positive, simply because I think all emotions are for our good. I think they always are something that are benefiting us if we know what to do with them. But I do think that it's important to distinguish between the sensations that we experience with different emotions. So I like to say there's pleasant, like, ooh, that feels really good when I feel this emotion. There's neutral, which just doesn't feel much of anything. And then there's unpleasant emotions. And that actually kind of feels maybe discomfort, or it could, if it's really intense, you may even actually feel pain, right? But instead of saying negative or positive for the rest of this conversation, I want us to really look at pleasant emotions, neutral emotions, and unpleasant emotions. So let's just start off, and I want you guys to put in the chat some of your most unpleasant emotions that you can think of. Like when you think of an unpleasant emotion, what would that be for you? So go ahead and stick in the chat. I'm going to pull that up so we can see. Stress, anxious, overwhelmed. Oh, the sound cut up for me. Are we doing pleasant or unpleasant? Unpleasant. Sorry. So think of some unpleasant emotions and put that in there for me. Yes, sad. So stress feels quite uncomfortable in our body. Anxiety feels very uncomfortable. Overwhelm can feel all of these: sad, worried, disconnected. For me, I thought rejection. Talk about unpleasant. I really don't like the feeling of how I feel when I feel rejected. Regret is a really strong one for me. I really don't like the feeling of regret. Grief, embarrassment, loneliness, right? Stress, all of these things that we're talking about, these are really unpleasant. Sometimes, and I think about grief, like there have been moments when my heart actually feels like it's being squeezed and it feels painful, or it feels like I can't breathe, or there's like this kind of excuse me, constricting around my throat, or there's like this lump and I try and swallow it down, but it won't go away. It is really uncomfortable. Yeah. So thank you, Lindsay. Get to your feeling well. I have a pillow that a client gave me with the feeling wheel. And sorry, everyone on the webinar, but I use this all the time because sometimes I really need it. I can't find a word. So I whip out my little pillow here. It was the best gift ever. But yeah, so we can even use those kind of tools to find out emotions, right? But here's what I would like to say. Unpleasant, these as uncomfortable as they may be, unpleasant emotions are not a problem in the sense that they're part of being human. I mean, any one of these emotions that we listed off, I'm sure all of us could say, yes, we've experienced that in our life. There's not any of us who have not experienced some degree of these emotions. It's part of being human, and it's not nothing's gone wrong when we feel them. It's just the human experience. But I think for many of us, what we tend to do when we experience these kind of unpleasant emotions, we kind of tend to do one of two things. We either avoid it, which meaning like that could look like just ignore it. It could mean like push it down and squelch it. It can mean dismiss it, or like just altogether try and escape from it, right? So we could avoid it by trying to escape with false pleasures or some kind of addictive behavior or something that just feels good in the moment. Or we can just try to ignore that it even exists, right? So that's one thing we do. Or we compound it, meaning that, like, let's give an example of embarrassment, right? So I may have felt embarrassed because I said something kind of silly or maybe not super intelligent in front of a group of people, and they all kind of laugh, or maybe they make a joke, and I feel embarrassed. But then on top of that, I'm going to start compounding it with, I start telling myself, why did you say that? That was so stupid. So I start judging myself. I start feeling shame. I start like kind of really just getting onto myself. And now all of a sudden, then I think I can never show my face in this. And why did you say that? So now I have regret. I have judgment. I have shame. I have just all this like apprehension the next time I'm going to the group, right? So now instead of just feeling embarrassment because maybe I said something, I've now compounded it with all these other painful, unpleasant emotions. And so now what would have been just uncomfortable has now become really painful and longer lasting. And so let's think about just embarrassment by itself, right? We talk about how it feels uncomfortable, but let's actually consider what are the sensations that we feel with any emotion. So I'll go with embarrassment, but we can look at some of these others that feel a little bit more intense than embarrassment. But when I get embarrassed, I usually get pretty red. So my face starts kind of heating up. So I feel this flushness in my face. My ears maybe start burning. My heart probably pounds a little bit faster when I'm embarrassed. I can feel my body curling in as if I'm trying to hide, right? Maybe I feel my head swirling kind of in this panicky way of like, oh my goodness, what do I say next? Or what do I do? So I kind of feel the swirling in my brain or my head. Yeah, and that feels uncomfortable. But does it actually feel painful? I don't think any of those sensations I would call painful. I've had babies. Embarrassment, it's got nothing on it, right? Like embarrassment, uncomfortable, yes. Unpleasant, yes. But painful, I don't know, right? So let's go to a bigger one. I think rejection for me is probably one of my emotions that I'm the least willing to feel, that I really don't like the feeling of rejection. But so when I feel a rejection, especially if it's like from someone that I really cared about, like maybe a family member or, someone who's really close, then I feel these waves in my body. Like I'll feel this like wave and then it'll kind of go down and then it'll come back. And it's like this, like, I don't know how to explain it other than a wave. It's just this wave of energy. My stomach will feel like it's a big knot. So it kind of feels like it's twisting, or there's like this hardness in my stomach. I know my heart usually is racing. For me, my sweat glands go to town and I just sweat all over the place. My throat for sure would constrict. I feel like I can't take in deep breaths. So there's like, it feels like there's a heaviness on my chest. Really unpleasant. But again, is it so painful? I feel like it's painful in the moment, but when I actually think about the sensations of what rejection feels like in my body, it's for sure uncomfortable. I don't like it, but it's nothing that I can't handle. Like I've broken a bone before. That's way more painful. When we're talking about physical sensations, breaking a bone, giving birth, doing exercise, running, all of those actually physically hurt more than even rejection, right? And so I think it's good for us just to actually say, I'm so afraid of feeling this thing that feels so scary to me. But when I actually consider what the experience of rejection or embarrassment or grief or stress or overwhelm or all of these things, it's actually not as bad as I make it seem. It really is just unpleasant or really uncomfortable. And sometimes it can just tilt to pain, but not very intense pain. right? Does everyone understand like where we're going with this, right? So, but when we avoid it, so that's if you just have the emotion by itself, how it feels in the experience of rejection, embarrassment, whatever it is, right? But now let's talk about when we avoid it, right? So when we avoid it, what we normally do is actually it's pushing it down or ignoring it or kind of covering it up with something that feels better. But what happens is that experience, that vibrations, those sensations kind of get stuck in our body. So then the next emotion, we do the same thing. We avoid it and it gets stuck, and then we avoid it and it gets stuck. And all this, what used to just be as something unpleasant or kind of uncomfortable, now we've like have all of it there and it's just stuck in our body, and our body begins screaming. Our body begins having actual physical pain because it's all just been piled up and stuck in our body, and it's stuck on a cellular level inside of our nervous system, inside of our muscles. We have tension in our neck. We begin to get headaches and migraines. We start getting stomach aches. Like now we've moved to the level of this really is painful. It wasn't from one emotion, but it's from a lot of emotions that we've been avoiding, pushing down, trying to cover up or dismiss altogether, right? So now we've moved from just the pain of an emotion to actually suffering, which that was never even what the emotion was meant to do, right? Or if we compound it, right? Like I said before, we have one emotion, but then we kind of pile on all these other really uncomfortable emotions, and it comes to a point where it becomes very, very painful in our bodies. And it is a really painful experience when I could have just been embarrassed, but now I have shame and judgment and criticism and apprehension, all the things on top. Now it's a much more painful experience. So what I like to say is when I resist emotions, that's when I suffer. If I just experience the emotion itself, it's just uncomfortable, right? So how do we experience our emotions without going to those two extremes of avoiding or compounding it? Well, I have it all written up here on my little board for you, right? Number one, everybody hates this, but I'm telling you, if you want to feel better, meaning if you want to get better at feeling, and in turn, if you want to feel more positive and less uncomfortable, then this is number one key. Allow it, which means don't avoid it. Allow it to be there. Process it. You actually feel it, right? And this is how you do that. When you're in, just like I did with embarrassment, right? We actually tune into what are the sensations in my body that I'm experiencing when I feel rejection, when I feel embarrassment, when I feel stress, when I feel worried, whatever it is for you, what happens in my body physically when I feel this, right? So notice it, describe it in detail, try and explain what the physical sensations are in your body. And then number two, so once you've done that, you've kind of identified where it is, what's it feeling like, describe it as much as possible. Then you want to just breathe. You want to breathe it in, like just as if it's part of you and the breath is just there to kind of create this soft pillow landing place for it, right? So just breathing it in. This also signals to your nervous system, hey, we don't need to fight. We don't need to run. We can actually handle this. So it allows your nervous system to support you through that emotion much better when you're taking in bigger, deep breaths. And again, like I said, with rejection, right? Like I can almost feel like there's something on my chest and I can't breathe. The more I kind of just even try and open up and breathe, it kind of lessens the intensity and allows it to move through my body. So breathing and then opening up to it like, oh, I see you. You're there. I'm here with you. It's like opening or leaning into whatever emotion you're feeling. Instead of trying to push it away or fix it or change it, you open up to it. Because this is my own personal belief, but I've seen it with lots of my clients. And if you've worked with me for a while, you know this to be true, that when you're even unpleasant emotions or painful emotions, they are messengers to you, and they are an opportunity for you to learn more about yourself an opportunity for you to put your focus on a place that needs attention. It's a call for healing. It's a call for priority. It's a call for, hey, I need you in this moment. And it's a beautiful opportunity for you to meet yourself with love and compassion and support that you may need. If we didn't feel pain, if we didn't feel discomfort, we wouldn't know to give our attention to that thing, right? So emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, are for your good. So if you take a moment to open up to it rather than avoid it, it actually has you growing and developing a much better relationship with yourself and with others. So notice it, describe it, breathe into it, and open up to it. And if you do this within usually around 60 to 120 seconds, so a minute or two, you're going to notice that those vibrations, those sensations actually pass through your body and out. They don't want to stay stuck. They're just trying to tell you a message, and that's all. So if you actually engage with them, they don't need to stay there. They will pass through and move through your body. Now, in the beginning, it takes a little bit longer because this is a skill set. And so it may not happen that quickly for you, but the more you practice it now, I mean, I've been doing it for a while, a couple of years, and usually within 30 seconds, if it's a really big one like rejection, I usually have to cry a little bit and I usually have to really like meet myself and support myself. But within 5 minutes, even a really, really intense, heavy emotion can pass through my body and it just feels clean. It just feels like it's gone. It just feels like it finished a course, right? But when you avoid emotions, you cut yourself off from yourself. And that is my idea of suffering. Because when you cut yourself off from you cut yourself off from all that is good to you, all your experience, and it cuts you off from the pleasant experiences in your life too, those pleasant emotions. When you cut yourself off from feeling anything, you also cut yourself off from feeling the pleasant emotions. And so in my idea, that is suffering. So it's really, really important, even though it may be uncomfortable in the beginning, allow it and process it. Okay. Then once you've done that, it gives you authority over it. Okay. Before we go to number 2, sorry, I have some questions for you. Oh, back up. Okay. In the chat, here we go, ladies. This is for you. Ask yourself this, and then you can put this in the chat. What emotions are you most likely to avoid? So like for me, rejection was a big one, and regret. Those are probably my 2 biggest ones. I don't like regret and I don't like rejection. But for you, what are emotions that you find that you're most likely to avoid? Regret and embarrassment. Yeah, me too. Fear. Oh, yeah. Oh, that should have been on my list too. Yes, fear, especially for my kids, right? Yeah, these feel really uncomfortable. But so whatever one. So with Anna, you can just choose one of those, whichever one. And Lindsay, the same for you. If you can just choose one and then describe what sensations you experience when you feel that emotion. So this may be hard because you're not feeling it right now, but just kind of imagine when I feel fear, or when I feel regret or embarrassment or worry, what sensations happen in my body. You don't have to put this in the chat, but just kind of think about that and really go through. Oh, okay, you did. That's fine too. Yeah, really think about those sensations you experience. And then I want you to think, if I did experience these emotions again, so tight chest, dizzy, heaviness starting in my head, moving through my chest and body. Like I said before, maybe a constriction in your throat, maybe, the heaviness on my chest, maybe hard to breathe, maybe the stomach, clenched jaw. Yes, all of these things, right? Would you be able to handle it? Are those things that you can survive? Will you live through it? Will you be able to handle this? Yeah. 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 I think that we've survived harder things than a clenched jaw or heaviness in our head or, tightness in our chest, dizziness. We've done harder things, right? So I kind of like to say the worst thing that can happen to me is an emotion, and I can handle an emotion. Because usually the thing that our brain is afraid of the most is that we're going to feel something, and it doesn't want us to feel this thing. So why am I afraid to do this? Well, I'm afraid I'm going to fail, and then I'm going to tell myself I'm a horrible person, or that I can't do things, or I'll feel insecure, or I'll feel shame, or I'll feel all the things. Well, okay, if that's the worst thing that can happen, I can do that. I can do a clenched jaw and dizziness. I can do hard breathing or a tight throat. Like, I can do that. So that's okay. I can do an emotion. I can handle an emotion. And I think when we begin to view emotions that way and really shift our mindset around emotions, we are much more open to allowing ourselves to feel it. We're much more open to moving forward in our life and not being so afraid of feeling unpleasant emotions, right? Okay. Now, number 2, we're ready. Once you've processed the emotion, you haven't avoided it because now you know I can handle whatever emotion I'm going to experience. You have this authority and power over it, right? Because you know that you can do it. And now we're at the point where you can start to choose if you want to feel differently. And you can choose to feel on purpose, right? So now another question, here we go. Put in the chat, what are the most useful emotions that you can think of? Like when you think when I feel this way, I really like the way I show up. I really like how productive I am. I like how I treat others. I like, like you're creating good things in your life. You're being the kind of person you want. So think of some of those most useful emotions that help you become that or be that kind of person. Put it in the chat. Joy. Yes. Restlessness? Huh. Maybe explain that a little bit. I'm like, that doesn't feel great. These are positive ones, but restlessness. Oh, so it makes you get up and move. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Connection. Good. I like it. Yes. So some of mine is love, confidence, and excitement. Those I feel like when I feel those, they really help me be the kind of person I want, and empathy. I really, really love empathy. Confidence, yes. Compassion, peace. When I feel peaceful, I tend to be much more effective or efficient, right? So yeah, there's all these emotions that we would feel they feel even pleasant. They feel good in our body. Those feel way better. Even restlessness, even though it feels a little yucky, it gets you up and moving, right? So there are even kind of unpleasant emotions that can even have you that are useful in your life. They can really move you forward in the way that you want, right? So what are the most debilitating emotions now? So when I think about the things that are holding you back or keeping you from what you want for your life, and put those in the chat. Fear. Yep. That was my top one. So yeah. Worry. Yes. Failure. Yes. Discouragement, confusion, anxiety, stress, all of those. Anger, I don't know, overwhelm. Yes. Okay. Yeah, these are all great ones. Like, I think it's pretty easy for us to identify, hey, these emotions they really hold you back rather than moving you forward, right? So, what if you weren't afraid to feel them and you were allowed them to just be there and then process it and move through your body? Then you wouldn't even you could just move on and let those go. Those emotions that don't serve you or they kind of debilitate you. When you learn to process your emotions, you can just let it go, right? So look at the results that you've created in your life that you do love? What emotions created those or fueled those? Like when you really think about the things you just really love in your life, what emotions created that or fueled that? You can just answer that on our own, or you can put it in the chat. I love all your answers. Feeling engaged, connected. Yeah, you've mentioned connection several times. Yep. Feeling joyful, spontaneous. Ooh, do you have your will out? These are great ones. So good. Creative spark. Yes. I love it. Yeah. So I want you to think about emotions as if it's like a toolbox, right? Like, or like a little tool bag, a toolbox of some kind, right? You have all these different tools and they all do different things and they all have different names. I want you to imagine that emotions are just like that. It's like you have a toolbox of emotions and they all have their role and their place and they help you do different things, right? And what would it be like if you could just think to yourself, I want to do this. What emotion would I need to fuel me or drive me? If you could just choose emotions as a tool and say, yep, I'm going to choose joy today. I'm going to choose connection. I'm going to choose spontaneity. I'm going to choose collaboration. I'm going to choose all of these things, right, that move us forward. And we could actually pick them up and use them in that way. What if that were possible? Here's the good news, ladies. It totally is. And if you've been following along with the emails this month or the social media content, or if you've worked with me before, you know, and you would have learned that your emotions, even though we're taught otherwise, but your emotions come from your thinking. They come from your thought, in your thoughts. And you have all the control of your thinking and your perception and your story that you tell yourself. So therefore, you have control over what you want to feel. I know for most of us, we were taught most of our life that our emotions are just kind of a reaction or a response to something that's happened. So our circumstance, maybe it's an event that happened or someone said something or did something, and therefore we feel a certain way in response to that. But we're missing a whole point, a whole like step here is that someone said or did something or some event took place in your life, and then our brain interpreted it. It told a story about it. And then therefore we feel a certain way based on our brain's interpretation. So we can even look at current events right now, like this really tragic thing happening in the world with Israel and the Palestinians, right? The Palestinians. And I have been amazed at the range of emotions that come. So the same circumstance, there's this war between these two groups of people, and they're both killing and bombing and doing horrible things, right? But I've heard people feel really, really sad and just crying, grieving the tragedy of it. I've heard people get really angry and be really judgy and critical of one side. I've heard people feeling indignation. I've heard people feeling, I mean, I kind of am like, well, this is not so great, but they feel very neutral. They're just like, yeah, this stuff happens. This is life, whatever. And they feel very just kind of neutral about the whole thing. I hear people being really afraid that maybe this is how this is going to impact their life, or maybe it's going to come all the way to America or wherever, right? Like there's a lot of different emotions that people have, even though the event is the same. It's because the way their brain is interpreting or the story around it or the way that they're thinking about it, it's creating different emotions in their body. And I'm not saying any are right or wrong. I'm just trying to point out, like, it doesn't matter what the event is. It's all about the way that you are interpreting it, right? So this is a whole webinar we could do. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is important to at least somewhat understand this concept in order to go to number 2. If you need to understand this more, then sign up for a pre-discovery session and I will teach you more about this concept and more in depth. And we'll talk about this so that you can move forward to feeling better, because it is really key in order for you to have that authority to be able to feel on purpose. Okay. So let's go back to the toolbox of emotion, like the image of a toolbox of emotions. How can we learn to purposely feel happy if we want to? How can you learn to purposely feel excited or disciplined or spontaneous or joyful or all the things that we know that will help us move forward? Well, this is a skill. It's not something that we do intuitively. It's not something that we were taught. This is something that you're going to have to practice and practice on purpose. And this is not all about positivity. I mean, I like positivity, but again, I think there's place and time for both negativity, if you want to call it that, and positivity. But it's more about feeling on purpose, choosing the emotions that you want to feel in order for you to show up in the way you want, to be the kind of person you want, and to create the life that you want. So I call it feeling on purpose. So how do you develop this skill? So number 2, here we go. You can choose how you want to feel. And there's lots of ways to do this, but I'm going to just give you 2 quick ways for today for you to just get you going on practicing this skill. The first one is use what I call power sentences or pocket sentences. I kind of like power sentences, I think, are what people normally call these, but I like pocket sentences as if I had a bunch of little sentences in my pocket and I would just whip one out, right? But basically, these are go-to sentences that you know that when you say them, it's going to cultivate or invoke a certain kind of emotion for you. So for instance, like I know a big one that a lot of people say, and it's a wonderful one, is I can do hard things, right? So usually people say that when they are feeling a little insecure, they're feeling not so confident, they're feeling a little apprehensive, or maybe even feeling fear. And they say to themselves, like they pull out that pocket sentence, but remember, I can do hard things. I can do hard things. I can do hard things. And that puts in their body, it fills their body with a little bit more sense of bravery, of boldness, of confidence, so that they can move forward in that rather than letting fear hold them back, right? Another one I love is I was made for this. Because in these moments where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, but by golly, I was made for this. And it just brings so much confidence into your body. And then you can move from that place of confidence. Or one that I hear in the US a lot is, you do you, boo. I just think it's so funny, but you do you. But it's this idea of like, even if like I don't have to fear rejection, I get to be me. And it kind of creates this feeling of authenticity and it feels natural, it feels organic, right? And you can just feel free to be who you want to be. So I love that. I mean, I don't think people would call it a power statement, but I believe it is because I know it invokes this emotion of freedom. Here's some of my go-to. I'll share them with you, and then you can come up with some of your own. Or actually, I have a really good friend who like created this little calendar and has put it on my social media and my website for 30 days of power sentences. I'll share that link with you when I post this on my site. But here's some of my go-tos. It's okay if they reject you. I don't reject you. Remember, I'm afraid to feel rejection. That's the one I'm the least willing to feel. So I've kind of come up with this power statement that when I know I'm going into a place or maybe have felt rejected, immediately I say to myself, it's okay if they reject you. I don't reject you. So I move from feeling rejected to accepted, or from unsafe to safe really quickly, because I just say that one, well, it's 2 sentences, but this one power statement or pocket sentence that I use all the time. Another favorite of mine is love is always an option, because I love to be fueled by love. I feel like it's one of the best feeling emotions in my body. It feels so good. And I think it gives me the best results. And I feel like it has me being the kind of person I want to be. So even if I'm feeling angry, or if I'm feeling frustrated or critical or judgmental, I will just pull out this sentence out of my pocket. Remember, girl, love is always an option. And it does. It brings, that's right, love, love. It fuels my body with love. And so I show up in a very different way. Another one, if you've worked with me, you've heard this lots of times. I say, I get to choose. For a client, I say, you get to choose. I say it all the time. And it feels a sense of freedom. It feels a sense of power. I get to choose. It's my life. It's my choice. I get to choose. If I want to feel compassion, I say, of course, that makes sense. Or we're humans. I'm a human. We're humans. She's a human. He's a human. I use that all the time. And that brings a sense of compassion and empathy. When you think about those emotions that some of you listed on the side, really think about what is a sentence that I can kind of have as a pocket sentence that will invoke these kind of emotions in my body that I want to use as tools. So if you want to use those things, those emotions from your toolbox, find the sentences that are going to have you feeling that emotion that you can be fueled by. Second is practice one emotion all day long. So let's say your emotion's joy. That was one of them that came up, right? I want to feel joy all day long. Well, this is going to take some intentionality, but the more you practice it, the more familiar you're going to be with joy. The more familiar you're going to be with what are the thoughts that bring joy in my life. You're going to see more things that bring joy. You're going to bring more things in your life that bring joy. So if it's feeling joy, think a power sentence that creates joy, right? Look for things that bring joy to you. Be like on the lookout for it. Act joyful. Create joyful things. Stay committed to joy all day long. It's like you're just being incredibly intentional with one emotion, because then you'll get really good at that one emotion and it'll be much easier to do it in the future. If you want to invoke or like kind of pull that toolbox out, you're like, I know how to use this. I spent a whole day using this, right? So those are the two things you can start off with to really begin to feel on purpose. Use power sentences or pocket sentences, and then practice one emotion at a time all day long. So if you want to practice one emotion, ooh, goodness gracious. Okay, here's some questions that you can start out with the beginning of the day to help you with that. What emotion do I want to feel today? So you just pick. There's no like magic one. You just get to choose. Maybe it's something that you don't feel often and you're like, I wonder what that feels like. Just choose. It doesn't really matter. And then number 2, what do I need to think in order to feel this way? So that's some kind of sentence that you can use. Or what is the story you need to tell yourself? Or what is a predominant thought that's going to help you have that kind of emotion? Number 3, how can I commit to feeling this way today? And this is really important because it is going to be a commitment. It is going to need to have intentionality. So what do I need to do? How can I commit to feeling this way today? Do I need to put little sticky notes everywhere? Do I want to put a reminder on my phone? Like, what do I need to do to make sure that I stay committed to feeling this way all throughout the day? Number 4, how will I act when I feel this way? It's really good for you to imagine. Maybe you don't know, but I can imagine if I was feeling joyful all day long, how would I act? Well, I think I would smile a lot. I think I would be looking for things and just think, oh, I just love this. I love this. Like I maybe even go on a bike ride because I know biking makes me feel so free and full of joy, and I squeal and I laugh when I'm biking. So I probably would choose to bike rather than, go to my car. So I would make different decisions. So think about like, what do I do? What would I do if I was feeling joy? I probably would talk more to people. I would giggle. I would maybe play a game. I don't know. What is it for you? So really think and envision how you will act when you feel this way. And most likely that's going to motivate you, number 1, to do that because that just feels really good. And then number 2, it's going to be a way for you to kind of check in with yourself. Like, have I been doing these things? Is this how I'm showing up today? If not, why? Right? So number 5, how can I get back on track if I notice I'm not using or generating this emotion? For sure, you're not going to feel it all the time. That's not even possible. But if you're committing to it during the day and you notice, hey, I lost my joy, something happened, I got derailed, I'm really frustrated. How can I get back on track when I'm feeling really frustrated? How can I bring myself back to joy? Right? And really have that strategy already so that you can practice it throughout the day. Does that make sense? Okay. Comments, questions, put them in the chat box. So as you're kind of maybe typing out your questions. Oh, you missed number 2. What do I need to think in order to feel this way? Is that what you mean? Yeah. So it's up here as well if you need to look at it, although my handwriting is a little messy. But what do I need to think in order to feel this way? I forgot one positive, calm. Oh, calm feels so good. It's the worst one I thought of. I want to feel all day. Yes. Yeah. So really think through, like, what do I need to think? How will I act when I'm calm? How can I commit to this feeling? And when I get off track, because for sure I will, someone's going to come in and bust my calm all up. What can I do to get back on track, right? How do I start generating that emotion again? Good. Love it. Yes. Okay. So just to sum up, really, if you want to know how to feel better, number 1, you have a willingness and an allowing of all emotions, pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant. And you process them. You actually feel them in your body. And number 2, it's creating wanted and needed emotions that you have from your toolbox intentionally. You're feeling on purpose, right? So here's what I want you to constantly be thinking through when you're practicing how to feel better. Whoa, man, I put this way too far back. Okay. So here's 4 things that you can really be thinking about to build this skill set of feeling better, at getting better at feeling, and therefore choosing to feel better on purpose. So number 1, what am I feeling right now? This is the awareness that it comes when it comes to like feeling and processing emotions. What am I feeling right now? Number 2, what does this feeling feel like specifically? So that's where we're getting the details and we become the observer. We're paying attention to the sensations. Number 3, what do I want to feel right now? I'll put these in the chat too, or y'all can, maybe I'll slow down too. But what do I want to feel right now? This is being that deliberate, purposeful, feeling on purpose. You're being very deliberate and intentional with the way that you want to feel. And number 4, how can I practice this feeling? And that's that commitment and intentionality to creating that for yourself. Okay. So number 1, what am I feeling right now? Number 2, what does this feeling feel like specifically? Number 3, what do I want to feel right now? And number 4, how can I practice this feeling? I guess I don't need to put it in the chat box since it's right here. Can y'all see that? I was like, oh, I have it behind me. All right. So that's what I have for you today. For those of you who this feels very new to, for those of you who feel like this is all new, but you would love to learn more about this, there again, I'm going to put a link in the notes for a link to a free discovery session. Sign up. We will have a conversation all about this. This is probably the number 1 thing that I work through with my clients because this is by far one of the most important aspects of our life. Our emotions are what fuel everything. Everything that we do or avoid doing or don't do is because of an emotion. Emotions are really, really, really important in our life. And the more that you can manage emotions, the more that you take your power in the way that you choose to feel on purpose, the more that you can use your emotions for your good rather than allowing them to hold you back, the more you're going to live the life that you want. This is key to really, really experiencing and having the kind of life that you want and to genuinely feel better. When love is always an option, it just feels really good. When acceptance, compassion, joy, calm, peace, all of those are at your disposal and you know how to use them and you know how to fill your body with them, then you're just going to feel better, period. I don't know how else to say it. Like if you want to feel better, it's totally possible for you. And it's not just like some superhumans. We're all humans and this is all our right and our I think it's our birthright. I think it's who we are as humans. It's the power that's been given to us. And we do not need to suffer. And we don't deserve to suffer in the way that we do simply because we haven't learned how to feel better. So if this is something that you want to do, you want to learn more about it, sign up for a free discovery session and we'll get you in and we will get going and you will learn how to feel the way you want in your life. Thank you all for coming. This has been super, super fun. It's one of my favorite topics. I love it. So I hope this is a blessing to you today. Thank you, all of you, for joining. It's been a pleasure. Have a great one.